In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and dreams were both made and crushed, there lived a man named Charles Whitman. He was not just any man. He was a millionaire director whose name carried weight in Hollywood. Charles had directed some of the biggest blockbusters of the decade, earning him fame, wealth, and an ego that seemed to grow with every passing year. But behind his success lay a personality that many found hard to stomach. Arrogant, impatient, and often rude, Charles treated people like they were tools meant to serve him rather than human beings with feelings. Charles's latest project was being filmed at one of the largest studios in Manhattan. The studio buzzed with activity, actors rehearsing their lines, technicians adjusting cameras, and assistants running around with clipboards. Amid all this chaos, Maria Johnson quietly went about her work. Maria was a cleaner at the studio, a job she had held for over 5 years. She didn't have the glamour of an actress or the authority of a producer, but she took pride in what she did. Every corner she swept, every surface she wiped down shone brighter because of her effort. Maria wasn't originally from New York. She had come to the United States from Colombia when her life back home became too dangerous. Back then, she had been a professor of linguistics, teaching students about the beauty of languages and how they connected cultures. But after moving to America, things changed. Without proper credentials recognized here, she struggled to find work in her field. Eventually, she settled into her role as a cleaner, grateful for steady income even if it meant leaving her academic career behind. On this particular afternoon, Maria decided to take a short break outside the main filming area. She sat on a bench near the loading dock, sipping water and chatting with Rosa, another cleaner who worked at the studio. They spoke in Spanish, laughing about Rosa's plans to visit her grandchildren in Florida next month. Their conversation flowed easily, filled with warmth and familiarity. Neither of them noticed Charles Whitman walking by until he stopped abruptly, his sharp eyes narrowing as he listened to their words. "Excuse me," Charles said loudly, interrupting their chat. His tone was clipped, almost mocking. Maria looked up startled. She recognized him immediately, the man everyone whispered about, the one who barked orders and rarely smiled. "What language is that?" he asked, though it was clear he already knew the answer. "Spanish," Maria replied politely, meeting his gaze despite feeling uneasy under his scrutiny. Charles smirked, crossing his arms over his chest. "Ah, Spanish. So you're bilingual, huh? That's impressive for someone in your line of work." The way he emphasized your line of work made Maria's stomach tighten. It wasn't the first time someone had implied her job was beneath them, but hearing it from Charles stung more than usual. Before she could respond, Charles pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. On it were strange symbols scrawled haphazardly. Nothing coherent, just random shapes that looked vaguely exotic. He held it out toward Maria, his smirk widening. "Here's something for you," he said. "If you're so smart, translate this." Maria stared at the paper, confusion washing over her face. She glanced at Rosa, who shrugged helplessly, then back at Charles. The absurdity of the request hit her like a wave. How could anyone expect her to translate gibberish? And yet, the challenge wasn't really about translation. It was about humiliation. Everyone nearby had fallen silent, watching the exchange unfold. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others exchanged knowing looks, aware of Charles's reputation for belittling those he deemed inferior. For a moment, Maria considered responding. She could have explained her background, told him about her degrees and years spent studying languages. She could have pointed out how ridiculous his demand was. But instead, she chose silence. There was no point arguing with someone like Charles Whitman. He wouldn't listen, and anything she said would likely be twisted against her. So Maria simply stood up, brushing off her uniform. She gave Charles a small nod, not out of respect, but out of professionalism, and walked away, leaving him standing there with his silly piece of paper. As she returned to her duties inside the studio, she felt the weight of dozens of eyes following her. Some pitied her, others admired her composure, but none dared to confront Charles directly. Later that evening, as Maria finished her shift and headed home, She replayed the incident in her mind. It wasn't the first time she'd faced discrimination, nor would it be the last. But something about Charles's smug expression stuck with her. Maybe it was the casual cruelty of his words, or maybe it was the way he assumed she wouldn't fight back. Whatever it was, it ignited a spark within her, a quiet determination to prove him wrong, not for his sake, but for her own. Unbeknownst to Maria, the ripple effects of Charles's actions were only beginning. Word of the encounter spread quickly, through the studio, sparking conversations in hallways and break rooms. Some employees dismissed it as typical Charles behavior, rolling their eyes and moving on. Others, however, couldn't shake the image of Maria calmly walking away, refusing to let his insult break her spirit. Among these observers was Kevin Dawson, a young assistant editor who had always disliked Charles's arrogance. Watching Maria handle the situation with such dignity left a lasting impression on him, and set the stage for what would come next. The next morning at the studio, whispers filled the air like a quiet storm. Employees gathered in small clusters, their voices low but urgent as they discussed what had happened the day before. Charles Whitman's mockery of Maria Johnson was the talk of the building, and opinions were divided. Some people thought it was just another example of Charles being his usual arrogant self, nothing new there. Others, however, felt a deep sense of anger and injustice. They saw Maria as a hard-working, kind person who didn't deserve to be treated that way, no matter her job title. Kevin Dawson couldn't stop thinking about it. He was only 24, fresh out of film school, and still trying to prove himself in the competitive world of movie production. As an assistant editor, he spent most of his time cutting footage and organizing files, tasks that kept him tucked away in a corner of the editing room. But Kevin wasn't the type to stay silent when something bothered him. The memory of Maria walking away from Charles with quiet dignity replayed in his mind over and over again. It made him feel both admiration and frustration. Admiration for Maria's strength and frustration at how easily Charles dismissed her. That afternoon, Kevin decided to take a break from his work and stepped into the hallway. He wandered toward the storage closet where Maria often took her breaks between cleaning shifts. Sure enough, he found her there, sitting on a folding chair while sipping coffee from a thermos. She looked up when she noticed him approaching, her expression calm but guarded. "Hi, Maria," Kevin said softly, offering a small smile. "Do you mind if I sit for a minute?" Maria hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Of course," she replied, her voice warm but cautious. "What can I do for you?" Kevin sat down across from her, fidgeting slightly with the hem of his shirt. "I wanted to say, well, I'm really sorry about what happened yesterday. With Charles, I mean." Maria sighed, lowering her thermos onto the floor beside her. "It's not your fault," she said simply. "You don't need to apologize." "I know," Kevin admitted. "But I still feel bad. No one should have to deal with that kind of treatment, especially not someone like you." Maria raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Someone like me?" she repeated. Kevin nodded earnestly. "Yeah, you're always so professional even when people aren't respectful to you. Yesterday you handled everything with so much grace. Most people would have lost their temper." A faint smile touched Maria's lips, though sadness lingered in her eyes. "Sometimes losing your temper doesn't help," she said quietly. "It just gives them more ammunition to use against you." Kevin tilted his head, studying her face. "Still, it must have been hard. I can't imagine how frustrating that must have felt." Maria shrugged, brushing off the comment. "It happens," she said, her tone neutral. "People like Charles, they think they're better than everyone else. They don't see us as equals. That's just how it is." Her words struck a chord with Kevin. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "But why does it have to be like that? Why should anyone let someone like him get away with treating people badly?" Maria chuckled softly, though there was no humor in it. "Because life isn't fair, Kevin, and fighting back doesn't always make things better. Sometimes it makes them worse." Kevin frowned, dissatisfaction etched on his face. "That doesn't seem right," he muttered. After a pause, he added, Can I ask you something personal? Maria hesitated, but eventually nodded. Go ahead. You seemed so calm yesterday, like nothing could shake you. But I can tell it affected you, am I wrong? She looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. Finally, she sighed. You're not wrong, she admitted. It did affect me. It reminded me of all the times people have underestimated me because of my accent, my skin, color, or my job. It's exhausting, Kevin. Always having to prove yourself even when you know you're capable. Kevin's heart sank at the honesty in her voice. I had no idea, he said quietly. I mean, I knew Charles was a jerk, but I didn't realize how much stuff like this happens to people like you. Maria smiled faintly. Most people don't notice unless it happens to them, and that's okay. It's not your fault. But thank you for caring enough to ask. The conversation stayed with Kevin long after he returned to the editing room. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Maria than met the eye. Later that evening, unable to focus on his work, he pulled up the studio's employee database on his computer. Scrolling through the records, he found Maria's file. What he discovered left him stunned. According to her profile, Maria hadn't always been a cleaner. Before coming to the United States, she had earned 2 degrees, one in linguistics and another in education, and had worked as a professor at a prestigious university in Columbia. Her expertise ranged from ancient languages to modern dialects, and she had published several papers in academic journals. Kevin stared at the screen, his jaw dropping as he read through the details. How could someone with such impressive credentials end up scrubbing floors? Determined to learn more, Kevin began asking around discreetly. He talked to Rosa, Maria's co-worker, who confirmed that Maria had been a teacher back home. She never talks about it much, Rosa explained. But yeah, she used to teach at a big university. Then things got dangerous for her family, so they moved here. She tried finding teaching jobs, but nobody cared about her degrees. Cleaning was the only thing she could get. The more Kevin learned, the angrier he became, not just at Charles, but at the system that allowed someone as talented as Maria to be overlooked and mistreated. He decided to share what he'd discovered with a few trusted colleagues, hoping to rally support for her. To his surprise, they were just as outraged as he was. One of them, a script supervisor named Lisa Monroe, suggested taking action. We can't let Charles get away with this, she said firmly. He thinks he's untouchable, but we need to show him he's not. Kevin agreed, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. Confronting someone like Charles required evidence, solid proof that his behavior was unacceptable. So, together with Lisa and a handful of others, Kevin started gathering testimonies from employees who had experienced similar treatment. They recorded stories of verbal abuse, unfair criticism, and outright discrimination, all tied back to Charles Whitman. Meanwhile, Maria continued going about her daily routine, unaware of the growing movement behind her. She focused on her work, keeping her head down and avoiding attention. But inside, she wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to stand up to Charles, to demand respect and recognition for who she truly was. Another part feared the consequences. What if speaking out cost her the job she relied on to support her daughter, Sophia? Sophia, now 16, noticed her mother's quiet distress during dinner one night. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, setting down her fork. "You seem, I don't know, distracted." Maria forced a smile, reaching across the table to pat Sophia's hand. "I'm fine, mija," she assured her. "Just tired, that's all." But Sophia wasn't convinced. "Is it because of that guy at work? The one who was rude to you?" Maria froze, caught off guard by her daughter's perceptiveness. "How do you know about that?" she asked gently. Sophia shrugged. "Rosa told me. She said he acted like a jerk and embarrassed you in front of everyone." Maria sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It's complicated, Sophia. Sometimes people don't understand or care about what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. They judge based on appearances, not actions." "Well, that's stupid," Sophia declared, crossing her arms. "You're smart, Mom. Smarter than any of those stuck-up Hollywood types. If they can't see that, then it's their loss. Maria chuckled despite herself, touched by her daughter's loyalty. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said softly. "But remember, life isn't always fair. Sometimes you have to pick your battles." Sophia frowned, clearly unsatisfied with that answer. "Maybe," she said. "But sometimes picking a battle is worth it. Don't let them push you around, Mom. You deserve better." Her words lingered in Maria's mind long after dinner ended. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she thought about everything that had happened. The mocking paper, the whispered conversations, and now, her daughter's encouragement. A tiny spark of defiance began to grow within her, fueled by the realization that she wasn't alone. People like Kevin and Lisa believed in her, and even Sophia, young as she was, understood the importance of standing up for oneself. By the time morning arrived, Maria had made a decision. She wouldn't confront Charles directly. That would only give him more power. But she would document every instance of his behavior moving forward. If the opportunity arose to hold him accountable, she would be ready. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, change was possible. Unbeknownst to her, Kevin and the others were already laying the groundwork for exactly that. Together, they were determined to turn Charles's arrogance into his downfall, proving once and for all that no one, no matter how wealthy or famous, was above accountability. And at the center of it all stood Maria Johnson, a woman whose quiet strength was about to shine brighter than ever before. The days that followed were a blur of quiet determination for Maria Johnson. She started carrying a small notebook in her pocket, jotting down every comment, every glance, and every action from Charles Whitman that crossed the line. At first, it felt strange, like she was stepping into unfamiliar territory. But as the entries piled up, Maria began to feel a sense of control she hadn't experienced in years. For so long, she had let people like Charles define her worth without fighting back. Now she was taking matters into her own hands. Kevin Dawson noticed the change almost immediately. Maria wasn't just quietly enduring anymore. There was a new energy about her, a subtle confidence that radiated even when she scrubbed floors or emptied trash cans. One afternoon, while Kevin was reviewing footage in the editing room, Maria knocked on the doorframe. He looked up, surprised to see her standing there with a hesitant smile. "Do you have a minute?" she asked softly. "Of course," Kevin replied, gesturing for her to come in. "What's up?" Maria stepped inside, closing the door behind her. In her hand, she held the notebook she'd been using to document Charles's behavior. She hesitated for a moment before handing it over. "I wanted to show you this," she said. "It's everything I've written down about Charles. The things he says, the way he treats people." Kevin took the notebook, flipping through its pages. Each entry was detailed: dates, times, locations, and descriptions of incidents. Some were minor insults, like mocking someone's accent or rolling his eyes during conversations. Others were more blatant, like yelling at an assistant for bringing him coffee that wasn't hot enough. But what struck Kevin most was how consistent it all was. Charles didn't discriminate in his cruelty. It seemed anyone who wasn't him was fair game. "This is incredible," Kevin said, looking up at Maria. "You've been really thorough." Maria nodded, her expression serious. "I figured if we're going to do something about him, we need proof. This is my way of contributing." Kevin smiled, feeling a surge of admiration. "You're amazing, you know that. Most people would have given up by now, but you're fighting back in your own way." Maria shrugged modestly. "I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter, and I know I'm not the only one who feels that way." She was right. Over the past week, Kevin and Lisa Monroe had gathered testimonies from nearly a dozen employees, each one recounting their own experiences with Charles. There was Anna, the costume designer who had been publicly scolded for stitching a hemline wrong, even though it matched the director's exact specifications. Then there was Marcus, the lighting technician who had endured weeks of racist remarks disguised as jokes. Even some of the higher-ups, like the production manager, admitted they found Charles unbearable but had never spoken out for fear of losing their jobs. With Maria's notebook adding weight to their case, Kevin and Lisa decided it was time to take the next step. They compiled all the evidence into a single file, a mix of written statements, screenshots of offensive texts, and Maria's meticulous notes, and sent it anonymously to the studio's board of directors. It wasn't an easy decision. Going after someone as powerful as Charles came with risks, and none of them knew how the board would react. But they agreed it was worth trying. If nothing else, they hoped it would spark a conversation about accountability. Few days later, the board responded. To everyone's surprise, they didn't brush off the allegations. Instead, they launched an internal investigation, calling in several employees for private interviews. Word spread quickly through the studio, and soon everyone was talking about it. Some people cheered silently, hoping justice would finally be served. Others worried about retaliation, wondering if speaking out might cost them their jobs. For Maria, the investigation brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt relieved that her efforts hadn't been in vain. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the fear of what might happen if Charles discovered she was involved. She tried to stay focused on her work, keeping her head down and avoiding unnecessary attention. But it was hard not to notice the tension in the air. Conversation stopped whenever she walked into a room, and some coworkers gave her sympathetic looks that made her uneasy. One evening, as Maria was finishing her shift, Kevin approached her near the exit. "Hey," he said gently. "How are you holding up?" Maria sighed, leaning against the wall. "I'm okay, I guess, just waiting to see what happens next." Kevin nodded, understanding her unease. "It's scary, I know. But you've already done so much. Whatever comes out of this, you should be proud of yourself." Maria managed a small smile. "Thanks, Kevin. That means a lot." As they stood, there talking, Lisa joined them, her face flushed with excitement. "Guys, you won't believe this," she said breathlessly. "Someone leaked the video of Charles humiliating Maria online. It's everywhere." Maria's eyes widened in shock. "What? What video?" Lisa pulled out her phone, showing them a clip that had gone viral on social media. It was grainy footage taken by a bystander the day Charles had mocked Maria with the fake translation paper. The camera captured every detail, the smirk on his face, the condescending tone of his voice, and Maria's quiet dignity as she walked away. Comments flooded the screen, praising Maria for her composure and slamming Charles for his arrogance. "Oh no," Maria whispered, her heart racing. "I didn't know anyone filmed that." Kevin placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Many viewers had tagged the studio in their posts demanding answers. Reporters began reaching out, eager to cover the story. Within hours, the scandal dominated headlines across the country. Charles Whitman, once untouchable, found himself under intense scrutiny. Sponsors pulled out of his upcoming projects, citing concerns about his reputation. Fans turned on him, accusing him of hypocrisy for claiming to support diversity while treating minorities with such disdain. Even his closest allies distanced themselves, unwilling to risk association with his tarnished name. At the studio, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Employees who had previously feared speaking out now felt emboldened. Several more came forward, with additional stories of Charles's misconduct, further fueling the investigation. The board, facing mounting pressure from the public, announced they would terminate Charles's contract immediately. When Maria heard the news, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't just about getting rid of Charles. It was about sending a message that no one, regardless of their status, was above accountability. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a workplace where respect and kindness mattered more than power and ego. That night, as she sat at home with Sophia, Maria shared the update. Her daughter listened intently, her eyes shining with pride. "See, Mom, I told you it was worth standing up for yourself," Sophia said, hugging her tightly. Maria hugged her back, tears welling up in her eyes. "You were right, Mija. Sometimes picking a battle is worth it." Though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, Maria knew she had taken the first step toward real change, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt invisible in the shadow of someone like Charles Whitman. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future. The fallout from Charles Whitman's public shaming spread like wildfire. News outlets couldn't get enough of the story, and social media buzzed with opinions about the millionaire director who had mocked a cleaner in front of her co-workers. Some called him a bully, while others labeled him a symbol of everything wrong with Hollywood: arrogance, privilege, and a lack of empathy for those less fortunate. The hashtag #StandWithMaria trended for days, with people sharing messages of support for Maria Johnson and condemning Charles's behavior. At the studio, life began to change almost overnight. Employees who had once tiptoed around Charles now walked with their heads held high. The fear that had hung over the building like a dark cloud started to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and possibility. For Maria, however, the attention was overwhelming. She had never sought the spotlight, and now she found herself at the center of it. Reporters camped outside the studio, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or ask for an interview. Friends and strangers alike praised her resilience, calling her an inspiration. Despite the praise, Maria struggled with the sudden fame. She didn't see herself as a hero. She was just a woman trying to do her job with dignity. Every time someone stopped her in the hallway to thank her or shake her hand, she felt a mix of pride and discomfort. "I didn't do anything special," she would say humbly. "I just refused to let him break me." Kevin Dawson noticed how uneasy Maria seemed and tried to shield her from some of the chaos. He fielded calls from journalists on her behalf and politely declined most requests for interviews. "You don't owe anyone anything," he told her one day when she expressed guilt about turning people away. "This isn't about making you famous. It's about holding Charles accountable." Maria appreciated Kevin's support, but she knew the attention wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the world would move on to the next big scandal, and she would return to her quiet life. Still, there was no denying that something had shifted, not just at the studio, but within herself. For years, she had buried her past, keeping her academic credentials hidden out of fear they wouldn't be valued. Now, thanks to Kevin and the others, her story was out in the open. And while it made her vulnerable, it also gave her a chance to reclaim pieces of herself she thought were lost. One afternoon, as Maria cleaned the editing room, Lisa Monroe poked her head inside. "Hey, Maria," she said brightly. "Got a minute?" "Sure," Maria replied, setting down her mop. "What's up?" Lisa stepped in, closing the door behind her. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "You mentioned before that you used to teach linguistics back in Colombia, right?" Maria nodded cautiously. "Yes, why?" "Well," Lisa continued, "there's a community college not far from here. They're always looking for part-time instructors, especially for language classes. I thought maybe, if you're interested, this could be your chance to get back into teaching." Maria stared at her, stunned. The idea of returning to the classroom both thrilled and terrified her. Teaching had been her passion once, but it felt like another lifetime ago. Could she really go back to it after so many years? And more importantly, would anyone take her seriously? "I don't know," Maria admitted hesitantly. "It's been so long since I taught professionally. Plus, my degree isn't recognized here." Lisa waved off her concerns. "That's nonsense. Your experience speaks for itself. Besides, community colleges are different. They care more about what you can offer students than where your diploma came from. If you're willing to try, I'll help you apply." Maria hesitated, torn between excitement and doubt. But then she thought about Sophia, who had always encouraged her to pursue her dreams. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's give it a shot." Meanwhile, Charles Whitman retreated from public view. After being fired from the studio, he disappeared from the media circuit, canceling appearances and avoiding interviews. Rumors swirled about his mental state. Some claimed he was furious and plotting revenge, while others whispered he was devastated by the backlash. In truth, Charles was grappling with a storm of emotions he didn't know how to handle. For years, he had built his identity around success and superiority, convinced that his wealth and talent made him untouchable. Now stripped of his power, he felt exposed and humiliated. At first, Charles lashed out, blaming everyone but himself for his downfall. He accused the studio of betrayal, the employees of lying, and even Maria of orchestrating the entire scandal to ruin him. But as the days turned into weeks, his anger began to fade, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. Alone in his penthouse apartment, surrounded by luxury but devoid of purpose, Charles started to reflect on his life. He remembered the faces of the people he had hurt: Maria, Anna, Marcus, and countless others whose names he couldn't recall. Their words echoed in his mind. "You're better than us. You don't see us as equals. You think you're above accountability." At first, Charles dismissed these thoughts as nonsense, clinging to his belief that the world owed him success. But slowly, painfully, he began to realize the truth. His arrogance hadn't made him stronger. It had isolated him, turning him into someone even he didn't recognize. Desperate for answers, Charles sought therapy, something he had always scoffed at in the past. Sitting in a small office across from a calm, patient psychologist, he struggled to articulate his feelings. "I don't understand why everyone hates me," he admitted during one session. "All I ever did was work hard and demand excellence. Isn't that what people want?" The therapist listened carefully before responding. "Excellence is important," she said gently. "But so is kindness. When we treat people poorly, we lose their trust, and without trust, even the best work feels hollow." Her words hit Charles like a punch to the gut. For the first time, he saw himself through the eyes of others, not as a brilliant director, but as a man consumed by ego and insecurity. It was a painful realization, but it also sparked a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to change. Back at the studio, the board implemented new policies to prevent future incidents like the one involving Charles. Inspired by Maria's courage, they created workshops on diversity and inclusion, inviting experts to train employees on recognizing bias and fostering respect. Kevin played a key role in organizing these efforts, ensuring that everyone, from producers to cleaners, had a voice in shaping the changes. Maria, too, became a symbol of progress. Her decision to document Charles's behavior inspired others to speak up about workplace discrimination, leading to broader discussions about fairness and equality. Though she still cleaned the studio, she did so with renewed confidence, knowing she had helped spark meaningful change. When the community college accepted her application to teach a Spanish course, Maria felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the opportunity, but for the people who had supported her along the way. On her first day of class, she stood nervously in front of a group of eager students, holding a whiteboard marker in trembling hands. As she introduced herself and shared her love of languages, she saw admiration in their eyes. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. Though Charles remained largely absent from the public eye, rumors occasionally surfaced about his attempts to rebuild his career. Some claimed he was working on a documentary about redemption, while others said he planned to write a memoir. Whether these projects would succeed remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. Charles Whitman was no longer the untouchable figure he once was. His fall from grace served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that power without compassion is hollow, and arrogance without accountability will eventually crumble. For Maria, the journey was far from over. She still faced challenges, balancing her cleaning job with teaching, navigating the complexities of newfound recognition, but she approached them with a quiet strength that inspired those around her. She had proven that dignity and resilience could overcome even the harshest humiliations, and in doing so, she had become more than a cleaner or a teacher. She was a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of standing up for oneself and for others. And as she walked through the studio halls, greeted warmly by co-workers who now saw her as an equal, Maria allowed herself a small smile. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better, and sometimes that was enough. Months passed, and the studio slowly transformed into a place that felt almost unrecognizable. The hallways, once filled with tension and whispers, now buzzed with laughter and collaboration. Employees greeted each other warmly, no longer afraid to share ideas or offer feedback. It wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements and stressful deadlines, but the fear that had once gripped everyone was gone. For Maria Johnson, this change was more than just noticeable. It was personal. She had played a part in making it happen, and every day she walked through those doors, she felt a deep sense of pride. Maria's new role as a part-time Spanish instructor at the community college added another layer to her life. Teaching brought back memories of her time in Colombia, but instead of sadness, she felt joy. Her students were eager to learn, asking questions about grammar, culture, and history. Some of them even stayed after class to talk about their own dreams and struggles, reminding Maria of why she had fallen in love with teaching in the first place. Though balancing her cleaning job at the studio with her classes wasn't easy, she found fulfillment in both roles. Each task gave her a different kind of purpose. One allowed her to provide for her family, while the other reignited her passion for language and connection. Kevin Dawson often checked in on Maria, making sure she was adjusting well to her new schedule. He admired how she handled everything with grace, never complaining despite the long hours. "You're doing amazing," he told her one evening as they crossed paths near the loading dock. "Seriously? I don't know how you do it," Maria chuckled softly, leaning against her cart. "It's not always easy," she admitted. "But it's worth it. Teaching reminds me of who I am, not just what I do." Kevin smiled, nodding. "That's what makes you special, Maria. You've got this quiet strength that inspires people. Honestly, you've changed things around here, not just for yourself, but for everyone." Maria looked away modestly, though she couldn't hide the faint blush creeping onto her cheeks. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "You, Lisa, Rosa, all of you helped. If anything, this whole thing showed me that standing up for yourself doesn't mean standing alone." Her words stayed with Kevin long after their conversation ended. Seeing Maria thrive reinforced his belief in the power of collective action. Together they had taken on someone as powerful as Charles Whitman and won, not through aggression, but through persistence and unity. It was a lesson he knew he would carry with him for the rest of his career. As for Charles, his absence from Hollywood became permanent. After months of therapy and self-reflection, he emerged a quieter, humbler version of himself. Gone was the brash arrogance that had defined his public persona. In its place was a man trying, and often failing, to make amends. He reached out to some of the people he had wronged, including Maria, though his attempts were met with mixed reactions. Some accepted his apology, seeing it as a step toward growth. Others dismissed it, believing it was too little, too late. When Charles finally sent Maria a handwritten letter, she read it with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. In the note, he apologized for humiliating her and acknowledged the harm he had caused. "I can't undo what I did," he wrote, "but I hope someday you'll see that I'm trying to be better." Maria folded the letter carefully and set it aside, unsure how to feel. Part of her wanted to forgive him, recognizing that everyone deserved a chance to change. Another part struggled to reconcile this softer version of Charles with the man who had mocked her so cruelly. She decided not to respond immediately. Instead, she focused on the present, the positive changes happening around her, and the opportunities opening up before her. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't something that could be rushed. It had to come naturally in its own time. The studio continued to evolve under new leadership. With Charles gone, the board appointed a director known for fostering creativity and inclusivity. Under her guidance, projects began reflecting diverse voices and stories, earning praise from audiences and critics alike. Employees noticed the shift, feeling valued and empowered in ways they hadn't before. Even small gestures, like acknowledging cleaners during team meetings or inviting interns to brainstorm sessions, made a big difference. Maria became a beloved figure within the studio community. People sought her advice, shared their problems with her, and celebrated her successes as if they were their own. When her first semester of teaching ended, co-workers threw her a surprise party, complete with decorations and a cake decorated with the words, "Congratulations, Professora." Sophia attended, beaming with pride as she watched her mother receive hugs and congratulations from everyone in the room. "You deserve this, Mom," Sophia said later that night as they sat together on the couch. "All those years of working, hard, staying strong, you've earned every bit of happiness coming your way." Maria wrapped an arm around her daughter, pulling her close. "We both have, mija. None of this would have been possible without you cheering me on." Sophia grinned, resting her head on Maria's shoulder. "Well, get ready because I think there's more good stuff coming. You're unstoppable now." Maria laughed, shaking her head. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, one step at a time, okay?" But deep down she knew Sophia was right. Life had thrown its share of challenges her way, but she had faced them head on, refusing to let anyone dim her light. And now, surrounded by love and support, she felt ready to embrace whatever came next. Charles, meanwhile, remained on the fringes of the industry he once dominated. His attempts to rebuild his reputation were met with skepticism, and many doubted whether he had truly changed. Still, he persisted, channeling his energy into smaller, independent projects that focused on themes of redemption and forgiveness. While critics dismissed these efforts as desperate bids for relevance, others saw them as signs of genuine growth. Whether Charles would ever regain the respect he had lost remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: he was no longer the same man who had humiliated Maria all those months ago. For Maria, Charles's journey was less important than her own. She had spent years letting others define her worth, allowing their prejudices and assumptions to shape her reality. Now, she stood tall, proud of who she was and what she had achieved. Her story had inspired countless others to speak up, to demand respect, and to believe in their ability to create change. On a crisp autumn morning, as Maria pushed her cleaning cart down the familiar hallway of the studio, she paused for a moment to take it all in. The laughter of co-workers echoed in the distance, mingling with the hum of activity. Posters for upcoming films lined the walls, showcasing stories that reflected the world's diversity. And somewhere in the background, a radio played softly, filling the air with music. Maria smiled to herself, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. This was her life now, a patchwork of challenges and triumphs, heartbreaks and joys. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And as she resumed her work, humming along to the tune on the radio, she knew she wouldn't trade it for anything. Life, she realized, was like the languages she loved so much, full of complexity and beauty, constantly evolving yet rooted in meaning. And just as words could bridge cultures and connect hearts, so too could courage and kindness transform lives. Maria Johnson had proven that, not just for herself, but for everyone lucky enough to witness her journey.